this is strange. It hasn't happened before.
You were talking about blueberries.
Yeah.
It looks like Anissa's is frozen.
Okay. Okay, we are live, and Anissa seems to be coming back on.
Jamila, we are live, so go ahead. Sorry, I had some technical difficulty on my side again with bandwidth.
We kind of gathered that, yeah, but anyway, the gremlins hopefully are all gone, and we have a smooth run today. Just like to welcome everybody and happy Friday, everyone, all of our viewers. Thank you so much for sharing your time and spending this time with Anissa and I. And we would just like to welcome our guest for today, who is Kerry Knowles. Kerry will introduce herself, but I think that it's also important for all those who will be watching the rerun of this. We welcome you as well, and we welcome you to please comment and ask some questions, and both Anissa and I and Kerry as well will definitely respond to whatever you have commented or asked. Without any further ado, Kerry, I'll let you take the reins and introduce yourself to our guests today.
Thanks, Jamila, and nice meeting you, Anissa. So just to say, I wear a few different hats. I'm 51, version 5.1, and Jamila and I share the same year. And I think I've done a number of different things in my life, but what I'm truly focused on right now is going green. We set up organic farms around the country. I also run a LGBT focused parties once a month, which I've been doing for the last 17 years. So I've built a database of over 4,500 women, and they're all over 30 years old, and I've done that. That was something that was my personal journey. Being a gay woman, I wanted to create safe spaces. So, that was my journey from my youth and going into my 30s. I wanted something different that was out there. And then I've got an eventing company, RSVP Solution, but I mainly deal with On-Point PR, and we do a lot of lifestyle events. And then I'm involved in running and helping my ex-business partner with his, he's got a restaurant, bar area, so I do that as well. But paddle's been great, and that's how Jamila and I met. And I actually think that is the new way of doing lots of different events in different industries where the entry level is easy to get in. And it's just a nice, new, fun way of doing things.
It's a great way of getting to know more people. And I think paddle has now become the new golf in terms of networking. But it's such a lovely social sport as well. And it's inclusive. So you don't have, like you say, any entry level. Anybody can play, whether you played a racket sport before or not, whether you're a teenager in your 20s or, a couple of weeks ago, there was a 95-year-old man who was on the court playing.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a great way of getting to know more people and socializing, and it takes you out of your shell, I think, if you're a little bit of an introvert. Gives you that competitive edge as well, and get to know beautiful, wonderful new people like Kerry.
Thanks.
Anissa, what's been going on with you?
So, well, I think I'm just intrigued by this paddle is life thing. And I am so intrigued that I'm going to go and have it checked out. I know in Cape Town we have one at Lawrenceford Estate in Somerset West that's close by. So I think that's what I'm going to go and try out this weekend. Seems that it's the big thing to do, right?
It is a big thing to do, but it's also, it's so good to try new things that are outside the comfort zone as well. And it just it elevates you as a person, to keep new experiences in your life and meet new people and step out of your comfort zone.
But I actually think, sorry, I forgot to say that I've recently been involved in an online radio show called gofm.co.za. And, we've created experiences for brands. So now you can literally have an experience, online with online radio, obviously these type of platforms as well. And then the physical experiences at these different paddle courts around the country. So we did one at Stain City, and it's also beautiful there as well. You've got a lagoon, and you feel like you're in Dubai. So I actually think it's a nice way of actually doing new events, different experiences, and help.
Definitely. And I mean, I think before we went live, we spoke about that it creates a sort of an authentic connection and meaningful connection with people. So I want you to delve into a bit of that just before we delve into the actual grit, grace, gratitude theme of the conversation, because I'm very intrigued by this paddle thing right now. So tell us maybe how the two of you started connecting. What was that? Was it just the paddle? Was there something that there was common ground on the reason besides the paddle? What made the two of you talk to one another, and how did you hit it off?
So, Kerry and I met just a couple of weeks ago, actually, and we both joined a paddle Americano, ladies Americano event, and it's a format where you have 8 ladies and you play with and against every other person and we sat down afterwards and we had something called to drink, and Kerry and I just started chatting about what we do. And I explained to her that I hold Americanos at Killarney Country Club, and she said she stays at Stain City and she does the same there. So
I do events there.
Yes, she does events there. So we clicked on that and got to chatting, and one thing led to another, and here we are today.
And it's so important, I think, that when we make that effort and attempt to just have conversations, right? So whilst the sport is the one aspect of it, there's also just let's connect with people, because we are, after all, the same. There's oneness in all of us. We're all wanting to strive to have meaningful connection. And I think, Kerry, you were alluding to it earlier on, especially since COVID. And I think it's quite relevant, given that COVID required us to shift into that period from having this grudge towards what COVID was doing to us, in inverted commas, but yet it was also working for us in our favor, and a lot unfolded from that time. So, I mean, I'd like for you just to share some of that, Kerry, what you felt it has brought, and outside of paddle as well, what else has transpired for you to shift from that grudge feeling into grit and then grace and gratitude?
Absolutely. Well, for COVID, for me, being in the eventing industry, was obviously we were hit the hardest. So I truly, truly had to surrender in that moment. There was literally, I've always had lots of different options of doing different things, and literally every single one of them was just the door wasn't opening. And it was the scariest moment to be in, because I truly had to surrender and go, well, what can I do right now? And I remember going through all my finances and just like cutting back everything that I possibly could, and stopping policies and just everything to go, okay, how am I going to survive? And I actually didn't know what I was going to do. And I remember just, I've always been passionate about community projects, etc. So I knew I was definitely not going to stay at home. I was definitely going to be doing something. And, there was a possible job down in the in PE to go and help clean water and all of that for the communities. So I thought maybe I'm going to do that. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And then I got into selling nanotechnology sanitizers. So that's how I survived COVID. And it was just so bizarre. And the people you meet, and you just have to have faith. You're exactly where you're meant to be right now, and just follow the doors that open for you.
That's amazing, because it's in a state of uncertainty and not knowing what is going to happen next, or how you're going to feed yourself, or even keep a roof over your head. And it's that volatile and chaotic. you chose to go with grit and say, well, hold on, what else is possible? Nothing is impossible in that moment. And I suppose you found not the loophole, but something to do that was quite apt at the time. So, I mean, I don't know from your side, Jamila, would you want to just add to that? Because I think that's quite a beautiful, beautiful story for others to be inspired that it's not all doom and gloom.
I agree. Such a beautiful story indeed, Anissa. And
Mm.
everyone looks at COVID as this terrible, tragic event, and yes, it was definitely so. But if we look at the positive side of COVID, there's so many people who were forced to look within themselves and see
Yeah.
what it is that their actual purpose was. And you find that so many have changed their career path or their professions during after post COVID because they had the time to reflect and to understand and realize that this life needs more than just that day to day going into work just to find your salary at the end of the month. People wanted to be enriched. People wanted to be fulfilled in what they do. And I think maybe for me, for sure, because getting to the stage of my 5.1 version of myself,
Love it.
I cherish my time and I want to be
Yeah.
able to spend every possible minute of that time left doing the things that I absolutely love, doing the things that fulfill me, being with the people that encourage and motivate and inspire me. So I think that's one of the positive outcomes of COVID.
I agree.
Absolutely. I mean, uh, for me, COVID also meant a retrenchment. And for those in the States, Ronald, welcome for always being here with us from the States. Dr. Maria, thank you for joining us as well. Well, I think she's in England, though. So thanks for joining us. Yeah, I think that COVID, there was a layoff for me, being laid off from work. You never think it's going to happen to you. And more so, you don't think it's going to happen when there's such congruency within the company and your own value set and their big mission, right? So you're like, you believe wholeheartedly in it, you're working, you don't feel like you're actually working hard, you feel connected and meaningfully connected to what you're doing, and then you get hit with it. And at the time, I was celebrating. I was like, yes, the gift of time, it's a pause. And as I said before many times, it's not something you can celebrate, especially when you're the primary breadwinner and you sort of running the household. But for me, it was like you said, Jamila, here's an opportunity to go inward. It was COVID. It was what is it that is meaningful and purposefully aligned outside of being employed by someone? And what was the universe asking of me in that moment? So I'm going to come back to, before I go and respond to, because I think the audience of this show and others that I've been on have heard my story. Let's come back to you, Kerry, because what do you think the universe was asking of you in that moment when everything was just going wrong, when it felt like overwhelming?
To just be still, to trust and follow the
Mm.
open doors that come your way.
How powerful is that, Jamila? Because it's in the stillness. As I said, when I had to take the pause, it was about cutting out the noise, right? It was about saying, well, I'm busy. And the busyness of the day to day, was I really truly inspired? Or was I just living because, hey, I needed to provide? And what was it actually as meaningful and impactful? And if I knew I had a short time to live, even there, if there was congruency within that company's alignment of vision and mission and values, would I feel good about the impact that I'm leaving in this world? And the answer would be categorically no.
Mm.
So over to you, Jamila. Do you have another question on that for Kerry? Because I'm quite inspired to hear what went through her mind and heart.
Yeah, I think just to comment a little bit about that, it was as if God was playing a trick on us and saying, Well, let me see. You all think that you are in control of everything. Let's see how much you are really in control. And initially, we were uncertain about how long we would have to be in this state, of isolation. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, for me, I thought, okay, it'll be a couple of days or weeks or whatever it is, and we should be fine again. But as it prolonged and extended, you have to stop, like she says, and understand the stillness and feel the stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Then question what it is you're doing, because I'm not sure, but with your experience or yours, Kerry, prior to COVID, it just seemed as if we were on this hamster wheel, and there was just no time meant nothing. Um, you were at the beginning of the year, and before you knew it, you were at the end of the year, and all you seemed to do was chase money. I mean, working, like you said, as an employee for that paycheck at the end of the month. But how much um, time did any of us take to understand what our greater purpose in this world was? How do we come? Why are we here? For me, I think it's to serve, and our journey is about finding out how or which platforms we get to be able to do that. So, did you have some similar realization that this is bigger than I am? This is not just about me. Um, what are your thoughts
Absolutely.
on that?
So for me personally, it was actually quite interesting. I was in Cape Town at the time, and I'd gone through a breakup, and I needed to get out of Joburg. Like we do with breakups, we end up doing things we wouldn't do. Um, and I literally came back on the night, well, just before COVID hit. So I needed to be close to my mom at that time. And I think what COVID did, it also brought families together. And I think that's very
Yes.
important. It forced us to actually stay at home. So obviously, home businesses became the new trend, like how are we going to print stuff? Like who had what in their, in your complex, or,
Yes.
I mean, there were so many things going on, and we didn't obviously know what was going to happen. So it definitely also forced us to live in the now, because we never knew what the president was going to say tomorrow. you know, and I think we had to just deal with the now. And I think through any trauma or challenge, you are forced to deal with the now, because it's the only thing you can cope with, you know. Um, Within yourself. So I think, yes, I think it also brought families together. So it changed a lot of things. And I think now we're all back in the corporate environment. But why do we have to travel and fight the traffic to get to the office? We can actually use our time wiser and look at all the technologies that came up in that time overnight. Disruptive industries happened. I think we also realized how important Mother Nature is and our impact on Mother Nature. And, that's when I got the passion that we need to grow our own food, because no matter what, if we're growing our own food, we're actually free from whatever happens. If we can, have water and food, we're actually okay no matter what happens in this world. And we've had so many different things happen, the July riots, and I think it's got to come down to us as individuals and what can we do in this world. So, I've always had a passion in that, and that's why I'm involved in, setting up farms.
Mm, mm. I just want to acknowledge some of the comments here. So Ronald says, I was retired and COVID struck, or when COVID struck, rather, already at home and in semi seclusion, seeking my innermost me in awareness. COVID compounded and accelerated my journey. Be still and trust within the storm. The storm, the I in the storm. And then Andre, so we've got some comments on Instagram too now, Jamila. So I'm toggling between them all. So Andre Oka says, I agree. And now it's become more focused on successful projects. So I think what I'm making of that is that we become more discerning in what we choose for ourselves. And so that we know that what is chosen is for the greater good, not only for ourselves, but equally for others. And he also says not all employers understand that we can work remotely, to your point, Kerry. They want you in front of them in an office daily, which affects the delivery of duties coming from a more effective work process from home. Let's talk about that, because what is that doing to the psyche post COVID, where people felt that they could be purposefully productive within the environment, and they did innovate to try new ways and new means to deliver and execute. Talk about that in terms of your experience, Kerry.
So actually, good point there on Ronald with regards to retired people, and in that time, how, the older generation was isolated, which is another, sad situation for a lot of people. But I think importantly is how much knowledge do we have out there? And I think everything's changed. I believe now 50-year-olds are actually the most expensive people in corporates because of our knowledge and our age. We can relate to the older generation, and we're young enough to sort of understand the younger generation. But, so I think it's knowledge sharing that we need. And I think now what's happened is actually we have platforms to do this. So I think there's positives in everything, I was talking to somebody who was in the mining industry, and, he was just saying the stats are that when I think it's close to like 50% of people that retire within the first 6 months, some have passed away. Now that is scary. It's something like 40 or 50%. And that is obviously fear, because now you stop what you're doing. You're used to being on the hamster wheel, and now you don't know what to do with yourself. And I think that's the point. And we're obviously all different. So I actually personally don't like the word retirement, because I just think, I would rather just be always involved in doing things that I can possibly do. I think that word has a lot of fear based with it, because then we suddenly look at, well, do I have enough money now to survive? How long am I going to live? I mean, you start going down the rabbit hole.
Tell me, how would you reframe it then, Kerry? What would it be if it's not called retirement?
Well, I think it's just living my purpose, offering my expertise wherever they are needed.
Yeah. Jamila, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the minute you stop, that's the end, right? We hear, and it's the same with, our consciousness, the path to seeking what our consciousness is, our purpose is, our enlightenment, levels of spirituality that we pursue. It's constant. It never ever remains static. So we seeking this. We are on this path, and there's no destination for it. It's just a journey, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that we should start looking at our lives in that way. And in that way, there is no retirement then, because you're constantly working at improving yourself, constantly working at getting in touch with your higher self. So I don't think that ever comes to an end.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think what we are responsible right now, firstly, if we are still here in this frequency right now, then all we are responsible for is what we think, what we say, and what we do.
Kerry, what you were mentioning earlier on, I want to come back to that, because it is about being present in the now. And if anything, COVID did teach us that. But it's very easy to go back into the conditioned programming that exists, because programming is very difficult to unprogram or unlearn, one would say. So, what are some of the strategies that you've adopted post COVID to stay present in the now?
Sure, good question. Because my brain is always go, go, go. So I think,
Mhm.
a friend of mine, Taryn's she's dedicated her whole self. She's created a limitless website of a whole lot of different content on how to ground yourself, how to love yourself, affirmations, breath work, just
Mhm.
things that have come to her and through other sources. And I think that's helped a lot. I think you just certain things will come your way, and I think the biggest thing is we have to love ourselves. And that
Absolutely.
is probably the easiest thing to say. But I mean, 51 now, and I'm still dealing
Mm,
with my inner child on a day-to-day
absolutely.
basis. And I've recognized that more and more is that now I have to protect my inner child. I have to nourish my inner child. I have to go, well, you know what? What would you say to your inner child? Would you put
Mm,
up with it? No, you wouldn't. So set healthy boundaries. And obviously, you have to go through different situations to get to that point. But it's still a journey to actually deal with those triggers that'll come along and that you have to deal with. And just lost Anissa.
Trust Anissa again.
I've lost connection. Am I back?
Back.
You're back. We went on too long.
So I mean, you spoke a lot now. There's a lot of things that were so powerful that you've mentioned. So there's the daily rituals, right? So the breath work, the journaling, whatever those rituals are for anyone and everyone. Not everybody likes to journal, not everyone likes meditation or journaling, etc. But there's definitely a continuous journey. It's not linear, and there is an sort of or peeling of so many different layers. And for us to walk our inner child home, you use the language that I picked up on, protect. So it's interesting that you're still using that language. And as you say, then rightfully it means that there are triggers. Because when we no longer want to protect the inner child, but rather use your words again, set optimal healthy boundaries, then it's a different ballgame entirely. Because the moment we in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, it means that we're still not in that space of nurturing and self-love. It means that we're still in a position of being impacted by external stimuli. And I'm only speaking to this because I'm passionate about the neuroscience and cognitive behavioral science and positive psychology. That's really where my work is stemmed in. Well, what I find is that when those triggers happen for people, they almost they're searching the environment for further external stimuli as and they're reconnecting to those past wounds and traumas, whether it was during COVID or prior to COVID or post-COVID, they're in that constant state of flux, right? So I think another thing I want to point out to those listening is that the language we use also needs to shift. Because when we spoke about need, when we're speaking about protection, those are all fear based. And it's also very much connected to ego because when I need to protect, my back is up. Yet when I'm not in that state, we talk about self love, sure, but how can we talk about self love when we're in a protection state towards others or a defensive state towards others, when there's a boundary or barrier that we're putting up in how we engage? Just wanted to trigger your thinking about that and how you would respond to that.
Very good point. I think it's just a constant journey of self-discovery. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if we can just be honest with how we feel, I think that and be authentic and impeccable with our word, I think that's all we can do.
Yeah.
Is it's a constant journey. We attract where we act. We're evolving every minute of the day. We're not the same person we were. So, I think it really is your own journey at the end of the day. You just have to take it moment by moment and try and understand where the triggers are coming from. This is where we bring up the generational patterns that we go through. And, we generally marry the one parent and we become the other until we realize, okay, that's not me. And,
Oh, yes, I can second that, Jamila.
Just being on the journey, or being aware that you need to be on the journey, being mindful of the inner child, and just being on that journey of self-improvement and self-acknowledgement, and ultimately getting to that point of self-love, total self-love. That's the success of it, isn't it? Because you will
Yes.
always have those triggers, and we are continually working at them, working one by one. I think that's it, and taking day by day. And I always go back to Hawkins' scale of consciousness, and the spiral um, experience that we have. So we might have the same, or think that we're having the same experience or challenges, or facing these difficulties, but you're actually moving in an upward motion, an upward spiral. And each time that we seem to confront these issues, which might be, we might think that are common or the same, we're confronting them from an elevated level of consciousness.
No, agreed. Totally aligned with that, Jamila. And you would have heard me. I love acronyms, Kerry. So I create an acronym of flipping just about anything. So I like the wow factor, but I don't call it the wow factor that you need to look and be a certain way. It's really that there's wisdom of wounds. That's the first wow. And the second wow is we are all warriors overcoming these wounds. So that's the second wow. Wow. And then the last one is there's wonderment in observing our wounds, right? And what I'd like to just add to this, and something that I'm striving constantly, I think we're heading into sort of the grace component of today, is we've got to give ourselves grace in that aspect of self-love. But if we're all still striving to walk our inner child home, and we all striving to become more aware and elevate our level of consciousness, when we're faced with, I hate using this, but it is what it is, narcissistic personality disorder traits in others, or where somebody's actually a serial narcissist, how do you show self-love or compassion or empathy towards them? And aren't we then called, for the ones that are on the journey already, to demonstrate that more powerfully? Anyone, Kerry, you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. I think, the grace aspect, it's happened to me recently, is betrayal. I think we could be bitter, we can hold on to anger. And unfortunately, we have to just, go with it and forgive. And I think you have to deal with the whole thing, and you have to forgive yourself for maybe being in that situation longer than you should have. And you have to, just trust that it is what it is. Rejection is, you're going in a different direction. So, and forgive, because I think that is so important. Otherwise, we're just going to make ourselves sick.
So I like what you said there. Rejection is, I always tell my daughter when she couldn't get into the high schools this year, I said, it's not a rejection, it's a redirection. So don't feel that it is that. And forgiveness is so powerful, because forgiveness is for ourselves, so that we don't get consumed by the energy and taking that into our energy fields around the resentment and the grudge part. That's part of what we're discussing here today. There's a lot of comments. Jamila, can you see any? Would you like to read some of them, or are you comfortable for me to read them out?
I think maybe you read them out.
Yeah, are your eyes also?
I'm 5.1 now. My eyes aren't what they used to be.
I love this 5.1 thing.
Yes, what version are you, Anissa?
Anyway, so where are we? So we've got Andre Oka on Instagram. He's saying, oh, this was on the earlier point. Sorry, Andre, that we're only reading it out now. The fact that we have 43% student unemployment, a very powerful comment there. This doesn't allow us over 40 to be in the workforce. So we're more focused on small to medium business model. We are living in real matrix. Somebody told me this morning they just watched the Matrix again. And we are awakened from the programming. I love that, Andre. Yet the agents are all around us to keep us within the program. So apt, Andre. So we are looking to reach, I'm not sure if it's meant to be Zoing yet. We are blocking in awakening. I think I read that wrong, but apologies, Andre. And then we've got Ronald saying, now able to reveal my natural gifts above skill and experience, finding my voice and helping others to find theirs. And then we've got discussions like these program my mind and brain with new thoughts, language, and awareness. The inner child, yes, they still await to come out. Free to be me, hashtag free to be me, he says. And then self-love and awareness, soul embracing, cherish the child within. Ronald, I love you to bits. Seriously, you just got so much wisdom and gems that you're sharing with us. Who are we apart from those we interact with? Maybe we can answer that question to Ronald soon. And he says, so many gems spoken here. Ditto to you, Ronald. So much wisdom and golden nuggets coming from you as well. So I'll put the question back up there. Ladies, who are we apart from those we interact with? That's the question.
Well, for me, we were having this discussion the other day, and we were just talking about how your tribe determines your vibe, right? So it's so important who you keep around you and who you keep in your space, to be able to either vibrate at a low frequency or vibrate at the frequency that we are meant to be at. So the people that are around you, I think, determine who you aspire or turn out to be, become like. I think.
Well, there is that saying, you become the company you keep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I said it again, that our circles now have become so much smaller, because we're so, oh gosh.
Tell me, is there a sound? Is there a weird sound coming through? Is the energy of this conversation vibrating at such a level that we've got some squeaking sound coming through to saying, yes, I agree? Is it always me hearing things?
Peacock.
Oh my gosh, Anisha, I think someone's trying to say something to us. There's definitely a message coming through. And it's so strange that you mentioned this, because the other day, Kerry and I were here, and we were downstairs at the restaurant, and there's this peacock lives here. And we were having breakfast, and all of a sudden, we just felt this presence over us, and it was the peacock that was flying over our heads, like literally flying above our heads. And she keep coming back to us and squawking, and she makes the most weird sound, but it was almost as if to acknowledge what we were saying, and she was there to give us a message for sure.
I mean,
do you know?
I thought it was an owl. I mean, it was just like.
No, but you know what peacock symbolize? In fact, my daughter, not a few weeks ago, they were doing like an America's Got Talent thing for me at home, her and my youngest son, and she did this one dance. She loves doing belly dancing, but just for me, my private shows that I get, no, not for the outside world. And she came with this beautiful scarf, and she said it represents and symbolizes the peacock, because the peacock is beautiful. It expresses itself, and it's in its wonderment, and it doesn't care. It's just in its fullest authenticity. So this is very apt that this peacock sound is coming through here today, because this is
So
what the
I
core
was
essence is.
talking, but then the echo was like, go, go.
It was, yes, and I think our conversation at the time was about authenticity. And
Yes,
this peacock just wouldn't let go.
The female's not the most attractive, but she's ruling the roost there. And I think it
yes,
was because we were talking about women, and women
Finding
are
your
obviously
strength.
coming within our women, and actually men as well now are getting more in touch with their feminine side. They actually are able to now express, more than what they were able to do years ago. The man had to, be strong and not show emotion and those things. So I think it's just we all finding our balance, of our masculine and feminine.
interesting that you mentioned that, because we had a guest on not so long ago about men unmute, and it was about men speaking up more. However, it's not their natural disposition. And what I also find is that there's been a radical shift with the alpha female taking charge. And so resonating with much more the heavy masculine energy, right? And I think the time that we are in now is asking for that paradigm shift to say, hold on, we don't need to be in the alpha female state, and neither do men need to act like they have to be in that alpha male state. It is about bringing everything into balance. But there's a long way to go. There's a long way to go, because it still exists quite heavily in a lot of different constructs, be it in our personal or our professional constructs.
And also in the workplace, like strong alpha females
Yes.
can also be, we were talking about this on the radio show the other night, is that it's actually, women, and we need to support women in business, because a lot of women in high-powered positions, I called it the stiletto ceiling, like you're not coming up here, like instead of actually how can we help each
Yes.
other
and pull each other up.
I attended last year a woman in tech, or no, it wasn't a woman in tech, it was an all-woman event. And one of the questions I asked the panelists, okay, so you're all women, you're in the same industry. So tell me, how are you actually supporting one another, almost being cheerleaders for one another, if you're all vying for the same position in making an impact in the same industry? How does the alpha female then deal with the alpha female within an environment like that? So have you come across that, Jamila and Kerry, within your own space?
I find alpha females respect other females' opinions. So they actually would respect another woman's opinion more than a man. But generally, that can be that imbalance of a man feeling emancipated. And,
Yeah.
so remember, a lot of gay women are alpha females because they've had to be. They've had to look after themselves. They're generally ousted from their family. They have to look after themselves. So they become independent women.
Yeah, you become independent women out of necessity, or because you're striving to be that way. And I think, like with women who are divorced or single, you have to be. You have no choice but to be. But at the end of the day, and I'm speaking for on my own behalf, you can be that alpha female outside, but the minute you walk through your door, you want to hang that hat up, and you want to embrace that feminine side of you, and you want to be protected and cared for when you come into a space, if you do have a partner. And it's about leaving that hat at the door and allowing your male counterpart to be in his natural state of protector and a caregiver and um, the strong person in the relationship. And I don't say strong, physically stronger, yes, just being able to nurture you. And I think it's so important to be able to manage that balance.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to me now around sort of the complementing of one another. And it's not that there needs to be any particular role and responsibility assigned to women specifically or to men specifically. But whatever those roles are in whichever construct, it is about complementing one another, showing respect towards each other, and really just relishing in one another's strengths and shining that within the relationships. Because I speak relationships, everything is underpinned by relationship. And it almost required, I mean, I was on a, surprisingly enough, I thought I was being interviewed the other day on a webinar, but they wanted me to facilitate a webinar on radical resilience. And when we spoke about radical resilience, it is something that is underrated. It's very different to resilient. I can be resilient to my environment, the situation, to circumstances, an event that's happened. But radical resilience asks very something different of us. It actually asks us to be in that moment again, Kerry, and be discerning, right, as to how we choose our response, because we often would be reacting or in judgment of, rather than saying, well, hold on, why might this person or individuals be responding in the way that they are? And often it's more to do with them and their journey than it has to do with us.
Absolutely. And I think also, the labels we use, I think we
Yes.
fought hard for our labels, but I think we get to a point now, again, talking about programming or whatever. So get out of the box,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
actually just focus on yourself, really, because loving yourself, if you're loving yourself, you will always attract where you are at. And hopefully, we all wanting to be better people. And hopefully, we all are choosing a higher timeline and are
Okay.
wanting to be around people who have a similar vision, goal, outlook, and we can make things happen.
Jamila, anything you want to add there?
No, I agree, and specifically about the fact that we are all pursuing that better, higher self, that higher timeline, um, and I think that that's just an ongoing journey that we're on, and we should never ever stop it. So
Yes. So I'm going to take a short pause again just to ask the audience that's here. Don't hesitate to say hello to us. We know Ronald is just so passionate and enthusiastic and is always giving us such great engagement. Once again, he says, being retired and living with my wife, I should no longer live independent, aggressive, focused, self-willed, and I have learned to be humbled in the house, more attentive, more grateful. My wife is in 12 step and very active. I must be understanding and supportive. Let's just check linked, or rather Instagram. Okay, it was Zion, not Zoin. That was Andre's comment earlier on about we are looking to reach Zion. Can anyone add to that? Because I don't know the term. I'm going to lie if I say I know what Zion means.
I don't know either, actually.
Andre, if you're still with us, can you just elaborate and tell us what you mean by that? I'm now intrigued. Can you believe we are 50 minutes into our conversation? It doesn't feel like that, hey?
Sure. Can I just maybe comment on what Ronald
Ronald.
has said there? Because he's been very vulnerable and taken acknowledgement of his part in his relationship and just talking about his wife doing a 12-step program. So I think it's so important, we do escape to different things. Alcohol has been the vice in my family. My grandmother was an alcoholic. I've run clubs, I've done different events, and alcohol, binge drinking is something that is involved. So, I think we all need to be conscious of that and how we can support somebody, and somebody's obviously on their own journey. But that's amazing that Ronald's supportive of his wife's journey. And he's also acknowledging perhaps his part in her journey, and I think, as you said, that's a complementary relationship. That's how a connection lasts, is if two people are really, truly wanting to make it work.
So the vulnerability part that you've mentioned, I mean, Ronald will be a guest very soon with us. He'll be on your chair, well, in the virtual realm, that is, Kerry. So I love the fact that he's always almost setting the tone and the context for others, and almost creating that sacred space for others to feel okay. And with that being said, we have a gentleman by the name of Patrick Skovgard. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Also very vulnerably sharing, I use a diaper because I pee in my bed when I sleep. Now, how do we hold space for those individuals that are out there that are suffering with these type of conditions and yet would be judged and frowned upon, right? The same with alcoholism. It's almost like there's a stigma. So we don't associate with people that are alcoholics or drug addicts. Or if there's a homeless person, I'm busy, as Jamila knows, with sort of a book where stories are going to be told of the unsheltered. They all have a story to tell, but yet when we're in our natural disposition, it is judgment. And yet we're not holding the sacred space to seek to understand more from a place of empathy and compassion. So, Patrick, I want to acknowledge you for that very vulnerable comment. Johnny says alcohol is a major problem causing gender-based violence. Andre's come back and said, Zion, it's paradise. From the film Matrix, I better go watch it again to acquaint myself, where everyone awakened escapes from the Matrix. So we, as awakened few, we are the children of Zion. There is a song by Bob Marley that expresses the freedom of Zion. Apologies, I'm typing while working, laugh out loud, my multitasking not best. Don't apologize, Andre. Thank you for the very good engagement, very valuable. And then Johnny, one last point here, says, all partners who commit these disgusting murders are alcohol or drug related. So how do we show grace or even be in a space of gratitude for those type of experiences, Kerry? Talk to us about something similar in your life, which was dark.
Well, I think let's look at it. I mean, I think again, any family that has, so in my family it was alcohol, and obviously my mother then had to grow up and be a mother at 10 years old. And my grandfather, he just went to the club and obviously didn't want to really be at home. So you have to get to the point of why is somebody, escaping to drugs and alcohol? Do we ever really ask those questions? And I was saying this because I actually was talking to a friend of mine who has been heavily into drugs, and her family actually never ever asked her why. And she was raped at an early age, and she's a gorgeous looking woman. So unfortunately she was abused physically a lot, and that's why she escaped to drugs. So I think we all need to just understand, my grandmother escaped to alcohol because she had a stillborn child. She just never really recovered from that. So her name was Daisy, and I have a Daisy tattoo, and I try and live the life that Daisy couldn't. So I could be like Daisy, and I could also escape to alcohol. And yes, I haven't done things that I'm proud of, and generally it's alcohol involved. And you got to look at all those things. So I think we just got to find a balance between everything.
And I think it's so important for you, just to pick up on what you mentioned, is that you've got to ask the question why. Why is someone doing this? Why would anybody choose to do this to themselves, there's always a deeper meaning to it. And this is just the reaction to that, them trying to deal with whatever experience they've gone through. And I understand this, because also in my family, my brother battled all his life from a very young age, from the age of 15, 16 years old, with alcohol and drug abuse. And he was just never, finally his life succumbed to it. And
Mm.
when you're going through this, or when you're experiencing living with someone like this here, it's very easy for you to judge. It's very easy for you to be resentful and bitter because they affect your life. But it's so important for you to ask questions. But why are they behaving this way? Normally, they wouldn't express it. They wouldn't share it. It could be abuse. It could be physical abuse. It could be any particular reason. But this is the way that they try to deal with it. And I always liken this alcohol and drug abuse. I think it's a point of dis-ease, right? it's
Mm.
it's a it's, if we start looking at it from that perspective, instead of looking at it from all the negative behaviors that come with it, if we try and understand it from that perspective, like we would with someone who would be diagnosed with cancer, for example. We naturally feel sympathetic and compassionate towards those people. But then why do we feel the opposite with someone who is battling with the disease of alcohol and drug abuse?
But I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's disease. So it's stuff that's not being dealt with, not being expressed. And we do that often in families. We sweep everything under the carpet because we don't want to cause an argument, and it's actually so important to have these honest heart-to-heart conversations. And, we've all got different upbringings and different relationships with our parents, our different cultures, and, all different challenges. So, it really is, the older you get, I suppose, it is so important to have these honest conversations about how we feel. I think if we can just do that, we can work through a lot of stuff.
What this reminds me of, as much as we're talking about radical resilience that we should all strive towards, I think we also need to strive towards radical empathy. And it's very different to more radical empathy and compassion, because and sympathy, they're all very different in its own right. And we must be cautious as empaths that take on other people's things. We walk a mile in their shoes. There's also a fine line with that. So that's a conversation for a completely different show. But the judgment aspect of it, the radical empathy, and knowing that everybody has a story, and that like attracts like, but what about those that are not like us? Maybe there's something to learn from them, and the lessons to grasp that they've had to live through. And it takes time to then just have radical listening. You'll notice I love the word radical because it requires just a complete over and above to the norm. It's not just the day to day. I'm listening with intent. I'm listening to hold that sacred space. I'm listening because I know you have a story, and your story is a mirror potentially of my own story. And what might I take as some gems from your experiences that I could maybe incorporate into my own life, regardless of the context being different? We have reached 59 minutes in this conversation, and we have 1 minute. Kerry, I'd love to hand over to you in terms of just overall the theme. What would you say are good strategies from an integration perspective to incorporate grit, grace, and gratitude into your life?
Well, I think just keep it simple, and you really only have control over yourself. So, just do the best that you can do to love yourself. I think focus on that, because really that is what it's about. And, talking about judgment, it's what you judge is what you become. So if you are around people who are judging, well, you got to look at, well, why do you have to judge? I mean, why does it affect you? Just live your own life. Focus on your stuff. And that's what it's about. And if we could all just love ourselves, you know, this world will be a beautiful place because we'll be attracting like-minded people. And yes, we've all got to deal with these triggers that do come up and, you know, face those. So at the end of the day, it's simple. Just, you know, focus on your stuff.
Jamila, anything closing from you?
Yeah, I think, in everything that we do, in every response that we give out, ask yourself, how would I feel if I would respond that, if someone responded to me the way that I'm initially wanting to respond to someone. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you place yourself in that position, then you always work from a positive perspective or from a space of understanding. So make it about yourself and consider how you would feel if someone had to treat you the way that you initially want to react.
On that note, I'd like to just summarize, I think, and I'd like to summarize with something that I think would be very relevant. It's one of the very earlier tools that I was exposed to by David Rock. He's the founder of the Neuro Leadership Group, and he's written a couple of books, Your Brain at Work, and a whole host of other books. But he introduced something called the SCARF model. And I think it would be apt to say that what we've just spoken about today is around know that when you're talking to others, the scarf is representative of status. So when you're speaking to others, don't negatively impact their status. Allow them to feel at one in alignment with you and never make them feel less than. The C in scarf stands for certainty. So again, when people feel uncertain in that exchange of that dialogue with you, the threat response will come up. It's going to be a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn even. Autonomy, don't let people feel they don't have some element of control, and not control in the egotistical or ego sense, but really that they can contribute meaningfully as part of that exchange between yourself and others. And then relatedness, make people feel that it's a relatable experience to engage with them, whether there is common ground or not. And then more importantly, fairness. We talk about fairness and everything linked to that, equality and equity and inclusiveness. And I think I'd like to conclude on that and saying that if we were more equitable and had more equality and diversity and inclusiveness, we would be a bit more aligned and have self-love and acceptance within others. On that note, I want to say thank you to Kerry for joining us, Jamila for bringing a beautiful guest that was just so in flow with our conversation, to the guests that have contributed as meaningfully as they always do, thank you. For those watching the replay, we appreciate your comments, and do reach out to Jamila and I if you'd like to be vulnerable and share your grit, grace, and gratitude story. And so for Kerry and Jamila, I'm going to end the live. We'll stay on as we always do to have a lovely debrief afterwards. Take care. Until next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.